You're cutting out. Can you repeat that? Go for production. Go for production. I said go for production. Production.
That's right. You're listening to a podcast about TV and film production. Join us as we converse with industry leaders and gain insight into their strategies, their systems, and best practices in bringing a script to life. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, Brendan Riley.
Welcome to another episode of Go For Production, where it's my job to deconstruct and demystify the production process in both film and television. We'll talk about strategies, systems, and tools the pros use so you can be inspired to move forward in your filmmaking career. Today's guest is Collier Meyer. Collier is a APOC from Texas who graduated with a Bachelors in Media Production from the University of Alabama. He started out working in Los Angeles as an assistant to the legendary Dustin Hoffman, where he quickly learned the ins and outs of the film industry. In 2015, Collier and his wife moved to New Orleans, where Collier spent a majority of his time as a coordinator on commercials and music videos. Most recently, Collier has transitioned to the scripted world, working on shows such as Wounds, Queen and Slim, and Bill and Ted Face the Music. Welcome to the show, Collier.
Hey, good to be here.
So I want to kind of start off asking you about your origins of the film industry and what got you headed that direction. Why did you choose this world of filmmaking?
Brainwashing, for the most part. Now, I've always just been really fascinated by stories and the ability to convey tall tales through the visual arts. When I was as young as my son, who's actually turning 4 tomorrow, I would wake up at like 2 or 3 a.m. I would run downstairs, I would sneak downstairs, not making a single peep. I would turn the TV on with one finger, immediately turning the volume down with the other finger so it went all the way down and that no one in the house heard it. And then I would creep up the volume just enough so that I was the only person in the house who could hear. And I would watch stuff like Nick at Night. I would watch sci-fi, like Child's Play and Halloween and all that kind of good stuff when I was 4.
You sound like the stealthiest 4-year-old I've ever heard of.
I wanted that media consumption, baby. I wanted it really bad. I love stories, and for the most part, my parents would always tell me, like, you can't watch that, you can't watch that, you can't watch that. So yeah, that's why I would be sneaky. But I also always found watching TV to help me like fall asleep, especially really late. But I mean, most of the time I would, watch until about 6:30 a.m. I'd hear my dad getting ready, and I would immediately turn the TV off and then go get back in bed. So my parents might have always thought I was getting really good sleep because I would sleep in late after that. But there would be a pretty good window in the middle.
So when did they catch on?
They didn't. You already said I was the most stealthy 4-year-old of all time. I really was. I was good.
So when they listen to this podcast, they'll figure it out?
Oh, they know. I've told them now.
Oh, okay.
Most of my deep, dark secrets are out there.
Okay.
Yeah. But as a young age, I've always felt very close to TV and film.
So, fast forward, you go to school, you move out to LA. What talk about this experience working with Dustin Hoffman.
Oh boy. So yeah, after school, I had enough dough to move out to LA. I knew that the window was going to close because money is finite, and so yeah, I knew my window might not be open again to move out to LA, and I went ahead for it. I moved out there. I had a cousin that lived in Manhattan Beach, still does. So I went up there, I met up with her, and I mean, I had a crazy day one, but I don't want to get into that. But yeah, I didn't really know anyone outside of my cousin and their contacts, and I did some like mock interviews, and the one thing that people said in these mock interviews that was like the least common denominator was find a media company you want to work for, call them up, ask them, who do y'all get your temps from? And that was the one thing they all said in common. So I did that. I called Fox, I called NBC, I called the NFL Network. Who do y'all get your temps from? They told me this really great agency in Marina Del Rey. Went there, interviewed, and after like a month of thinking that I maybe had bombed my interview, all of a sudden it was job after job after job. Did some stuff with Mattel, Universal Music Publishing Group. I really liked them. And yeah, just doing all that temp work. It was around that time that I got married, which was really tricky because during the whole wedding, of course, my wife's family is all asking me what I did. And I was like, I'm a temp.
Trying to figure out my life.
Yeah, I'm temping and we're kind of working at Starbucks from time to time.
We're barely making it.
Yeah, like not making it at all. We'll be moving back in the next week if I can afford it. And so we go on our honeymoon. We're eating lunch at France in Epcot, right by the fake Eiffel Tower, and I got a call to do an interview as Dustin Hoffman's assistant. And yeah, so that the rest of the honeymoon was, almost enjoyable. JK.
Okay, so you land that job, and then what's it like working with Dustin Hoffman, though?
I mean, I was basically, you start out with the mentality of just being a runner, and over time and earning his trust, I was given a little bit more. I am being careful with what I say because I did sign that NDA, and I'll tell you that the whole time I was working for him, like 98% of my friends had no idea what I was doing with my life.
That's okay.
Yeah, right. So, but I, as far as working with him goes, I'll just say that, I mean, he's like my favorite person of all time. He earned more and more respect from me each day I worked for him, and that's almost an impossible thing to do, no matter who you are. All around, he's an amazing guy. I learned that he was a great family man. He's an actor's actor. The things that I heard him say were, I mean, he's brilliant. He's really brilliant, and he's a very good, caring person.
So after working with Dustin, you moved to New Orleans. You're working in the commercial space, and then you start working on these features and TV shows, working as a coordinator and APOC. I want to talk about the production office space and world. For the person out there that is curious about what you do, how can you describe what a POC does or what an APOC does, briefly?
Okay, right. So POC is basically in charge of the office. Even when you have a supervisor and a UPM who like to micromanage for the most part, it's the POC and the APOC who make sure that the office is running smoothly. It's making sure that we have everything stocked up. It's making sure that every single department has what they need to get the job done. The POC has more control over things. They're a little bit more in the know. They're talking with people that the APOC isn't thinking about talking with. But the APOC is always there to catch things that fall through the cracks. They're there to do whatever is asked of them. I mean, same with the POC, but you do have your standard day-to-day operations. You've got to go through the production report. You've got to make sure that everybody's getting paid accurately by going over their hours. You're making sure that the Exhibit G, which has everything that the actors do, makes it to the production report so that all of the actors are paid correctly. You're making sure that SAG is happy. You're making sure the DGA is happy, and you're making sure that the broker is happy. So, and that all comes with going over the production report. It comes with distribution of schedules, the call sheet, wrap report, whatever else needs to get out. But that doesn't just fall on the APOC or the POC. It's, I like to think of the office as a total team unit. So I have worked on shows where the POC tends to put up a wall, and those offices almost never run smoothly. So ideally, the POC and the APOC are buds that just do whatever is needed of them.
And if you could describe maybe what are 5 typical tasks that you might do during a day as a POC or an APOC?
Oh man, okay, so I mean, first thing in the morning, what I generally like to do first up is go through the production report, go through the daily files, knock that out because it can be very, very time consuming. you're going through the loss and damage report. You're making sure that anything that was damaged or needs to be submitted to insurance is taken care of immediately, as fast as possible. Unfortunately, a lot of times you're waiting around for an invoice, but that's beside the point. I'm looking at the schedule. I am seeing what equipment is needed the next day. I'm double checking that it was placed on hold. I'm looking at the actors that are going to be on for the next day. I'm making sure that their SAG deal memo is all put together and ready. Then I usually go through an average of 300 emails a day and and then make sure that people in departments didn't send me an email and just assume that I would take care of something, because nobody has any clue how much demand we're getting. It's nonstop. 12-hour days are kind of a joke.
Right.
We are on call. So I'm getting requests from like 6 a.m. to 3 a.m. On a daily basis. Hence those 300 emails a day. And so I have to comb those emails really, really carefully, make my to-do lists. I usually do that by hand. Then I do it digitally. Then I prioritize things.
There you go.
Just to make sure that, I don't want things slipping through the cracks. And, but normally if something slips through the cracks, I totally take on all the blame. Like, I always assume it's my fault.
Right.
Yeah. But I go through that list and I see what I think the PAs are capable of, and I try and throw things at them that they can learn from. Production orders, that's a big thing that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Again, anything that light touches has a paper trail, so you can't get a piece of equipment without writing up a purchase order, letting accounting know that they need to put that money aside for X equipment, Everything from camera equipment to lighting to props. Not necessarily props. Usually props department handles that, but we're making sure everything's getting paid for, because the last thing that we want is to have a piece of equipment on hold but not released to us because no one knew it had to be paid for, which happens. But there's always a fix, and that's one thing I'm good at. If I have an hour to get an agreement signed so that we can have some equipment on set, I'll get it done. I'll make it happen. And that's one of the biggest skills that anybody needs to have as a POC or an APOC, is when there's a fire, you have to be able to put it out at whatever cost. And that's one of the hardest things about being in the office, is putting out those fires while your list and those emails keep stacking up.
So throughout the day, you have all these different things you're handling. You're putting out fires like you're talking about. You're organizing paperwork, doing distro. What are some of the big challenges that you continually face over and over again, and how do you attempt to solve them? Is there a particular pain point that you are constantly facing?
If one more person asks me to make a FedEx label, I'm gonna snap.
Why is
real hard, because like it's like what I was telling you. It's hey, we need a 50-foot techno crane here no later than this afternoon. We just flipped up the schedule, and I'm busting my butt. Can we curse? I'm not gonna try and curse, but I do tend to curse like a sailor when I get heated. So just be aware. But
to stop you, okay. So if I can paraphrase, it's the lack of forethought on some parts of production, right? That caused you to scramble.
Exactly.
Right. It's like, okay, we need this right now, and you're like, but I can't get it right now,
Or like I'll see that, like, hey, there's this 50-foot techno crane on the schedule for next Wednesday, but y'all asked me to put it on hold for next Thursday. I just want to confirm.
You're like, thanks for telling me.
Yeah, and then they're like, no, we're good. It's definitely going to happen on Thursday. Okay, so so we're having a new schedule come out? Yeah. It's we just need to get it approved, but it should be approved, shortly. And then a week goes by, they're like, hey, we need that techno crane on Wednesday. And you're like, you son of a bitch. I told you this could have been real easy. And then while I'm scrambling to get that techno crane, which, this whole problem could have been avoided in the first place, I get an urgent phone call. hey, we need to return some blank. I'm not going to single out any department here, but yeah, we need to return blank to blank, and we need it to happen in the ground shipping. It needs to leave today. It's like, wait a minute. So ground shipping, but this is urgent, and you're having me do this in the middle of an emergency. Okay, yeah, sure. I'll make that FedEx label right away. Here you go. Here's your FedEx label. And I just, every single time woo. So there comes the stroke.
So that's a good point. Is just the ability to adapt to the stress. So talk about
everything's an emergency.
Yeah,
like
everything's an emergency,
is
right?
An emergency.
So how do you de-escalate these emergencies? Do you have a process?
I'm trying. I've tried so many different methods now. It's a lot of the time, if you just kind of step away from your desk for like 2 minutes and just breathe, it's like, oh well. This is obvious. Here's how I need to handle the situation. I need to tell the person requesting the FedEx label that they can shove it and that they're going to get it by the end of the day and that it doesn't have to ship out before the end of the day. And,
Yeah, I mean, I find sometimes if I ask those questions, because everybody thinks their job is the most important. And, and that task is the most important, which it may be. But
right.
The question is, okay, I get that you need this shipped out. What happens if it doesn't get shipped out right away? Is there gonna be a penalty,
right,
or a fee or something, right?
To which I'm thinking, like, even if there's a penalty for getting this in a day late, it's gonna cost them maybe like $200 or $300 tops for like a late return fee. But does that take priority over production having a techno crane that they need for a shot by midday?
So you've got, let's say you've got, 30 things to do in a certain day, right? You've come up with your to-do list. I mean, that person that has the emergency, they don't know that you've got other things going on, right?
Oh yeah. Well, no, they do. They do, but this shipment that needs to be shipped to ground is top priority every single time. Oh, and then of course, when I do get the request and I start making the label, I realize they didn't give me an address. They didn't give me the dimensions. So I'm supposed to just magically know what the dimensions are and where it's going. And then that just forces you to send out a follow-up in the,
right.
So it just, most of the time when people ask production for things, they don't have all of the information together. We're just supposed to magically know what they're thinking. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the time we do know what they're thinking, and that comes from experience, that comes from working with these same people on past shows and just knowing exactly what they expect, how they expect it. I am very reasonable, and a lot of these departments that are asking for these shipping labels are making it happen. Like these shipping labels, they at the time, like, they might frustrate me, they might seem like the last thing I need to focus on. But a lot of the time, the people that are asking for them are the ones that tried to make that schedule come out the day beforehand so that I wouldn't have to rush, getting the technocrane in. And this is a fictional example regarding the technocrane, by the way, but it's very, very similar to real life.
So going back, you mentioned your to-do list. Is there a program you use for your to-do list?
I just started using Wunderlist, and I like it a lot. For the most part, I keep all of my notes on a Word doc. Mm-hmm. And because the Word doc, I have total control. I've used a website called Asana. Mm-hmm. They also have a good app. Anything that helps me delegate tasks to my team, where they also get to add notes to the tasks, so I know exactly how they did them, when they did them, that kind of thing. And unfortunately, most people don't keep up with it besides me, and then it just becomes I'll go back to my own personal system.
Right, I have to beg people to get on this app or whatever. Yeah. Like I've used like Todoist, but it doesn't sync all the time for me. So do you like Asana or Wunderlist?
I really, really like Asana, but most other people don't. Mm-hmm. That I've worked with anyway. It's always like me and one other person who really use it, mm-hmm. but that's the person I know I can count on, so I don't really need to know that they got their task done because I trust them. Mm-hmm. it's usually for like working with people for the first time. I always try and use something like Asana so that I know how they work. And to be quite honest, if I can get everyone using this program for like the first 3 weeks of a production, I know how they work. But at the same time, I also have a questionnaire that I give my PAs on day number 1. And it's a very silly questionnaire, but it sprinkles in some questions about work so that I know who these people are personally. I know how they prioritize things. Like it's all fun and games, but when you actually psychoanalyze the questionnaire, it tells you a lot about a person. And I almost always like know exactly how people are going to work based on how they answer these questions.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you say, hey, let's try this program. And I think what's great about that when you're attempting to do that, especially somebody you don't know, is when there's downtime, right, and they don't know exactly what to do, you're not constantly saying, can you do this? They can just look at the program and say, oh, these 10 things haven't been done yet, right?
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. And then you ask, why weren't these things done yet? And those answers are always really great.
I mean, talk about, working with office PAs or other PAs in general. A lot of times I find myself, it's just constantly tiring trying to tell them what to do. Do you ever feel yourself in that situation?
Oh, man, it's like, I definitely, I try to see myself as a leader and like a good manager, but it's very hard to constantly keep other people motivated. I'm very aware that everybody leads their own lives and has their own issues going on outside of work. And when you're a PA, you're trying not to think about those problems because it's tough. The money's not fantastic, and so if you have any kind of financial issues, you're going to work, and that's pretty much your life. When I started out, my wife was pregnant when we moved here, and I was an office PA on Scream Queens. Loved doing that. It was fantastic. But you can bet I didn't go to the doctor for myself once, even when I was sick, because I didn't feel like I could. And when you are working in an environment where you feel like you can never take care of yourself, it's definitely going to affect your work, no question. So I'm very understanding, and I'm a guy that'll always give someone a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth chance. There might be a little bit of a break in between, but we're all human. So when it comes to getting tasks done, I find that the best way to get it done effectively, at least when you're delegating, you almost have to walk through the entire process multiple times. It gets really frustrating. Like I don't love doing purchase orders, so I'll try to kind of pawn that off, but it causes a ripple effect because it's not just writing the purchase order, it's scanning it, it's keeping a copy, it's keeping those organized, it's not losing any of them. And if I'm not the one writing it, I feel like there's no guarantee that there won't be a mistake.
Talk about, I want to transition just a little bit to setting up an office. Like you go into the beginning of a project, what are some things you like to do in terms of making an office the best environment you can make it, or the systems that you're creating?
Well, number one is getting crafty. It's having food, it's having coffee.
Well, not just crafty, but just great crafty, right?
Right, great crafty. It's like, I swear to God, yeah, if someone gets me one more jar of Folgers instead of Starbucks, I'm gonna snap more than I will with the FedEx label. It's
like, but we saved $1.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you should have told me. I would have given you my card. I don't care. I will lose that money for good quality coffee. Yeah, I find that most mornings without a red eye don't go too well for me. I need that shot of espresso in there as well. But yeah. So number one, I say get crafty in that office. Number two, internet. A lot of people would flip that order. But you want to get internet, you want to have furniture, you want to have power our setup, basically you're moving into a house.
Mm-hmm.
You are going into your house for the next few months because, again, I said as an office PA, I never felt like I could do anything personal for myself. Well, that never really changed. It just got a little bit more manageable.
Right.
Kind of like life. I don't know that it ever really gets better. You just get used to it.
Well, you have a little more control now.
Oh, yes,
right? You can
yes.
okay, at least I can set up the things I know I like
Yeah.
and the way I like them.
Yeah.
Kind of like when you go set up your house, you're like, okay, I like a couch over here, I like this lamp over here. You can go into the office and you can be like, okay, let's make it a little more comfortable.
Exactly. I'm thinking about what are people going to see when they only come to the office once or twice.
Mm-hmm.
If an actor comes through the office for a fitting, for instance, I want it to be extremely welcoming. I want it to look like a professional office space. Unfortunately, a lot of the times we get stuck with offices where we don't really have too much control. This office that I was just in was like a sliver. I mean, it was a sliver, so everything was pretty much together. You could hear anybody in the office taking any phone call, sending any email, getting a text message. Like, you could hear all of that stuff. So ideally, you're in a bigger space, and that gives you a little bit more control. But you don't always have that. You don't. So again, it comes to just being able to roll with the punches.
So besides setting up crafty internet, you're dealing with signage, essentially trying to make sure, like you're saying, somebody's never been in the office. You're going to make sure it's clear. Where do they go?
Exactly.
Where's the bathroom? All those type of things, because
yeah, we put up 50 arrows. We put up like 50 arrows to point you to the restroom, because the last thing that we want is for everybody coming into the office to ask us where the restroom is. We don't want people coming in asking us what the Wi-Fi password is. So of course we put a million of those up. Never fails though. Hey, what's the Wi-Fi password? And then you point at the sign, and then they keep on looking at you like you're supposed to tell them exactly what the Wi-Fi is.
The printer IP address or whatever.
Oh yeah, which I just like. I gave up trying to teach people how to connect to the printer, because you have to have like the driver, and so I usually just walk around and use my IT background, hooking everybody up. And and that's another thing that's happened is, hey, yeah, we need this Technocrane ASAP, and then somebody walks, hey, can you get me can you get me connected to the copier? It's like, what are you printing? What are you printing? Oh, just this meme. For my binder.
Okay, that's a good point of question. Do you have any comical devices in your office to keep you sane, or try to post throughout the office?
My favorite thing of all time is the fuck it button. It's, you know how Staples had that like red button that you would press and it would say like,
that was easy.
That was easy. Yeah, we've had one in the past that just said, fuck it.
This is a rated R podcast now.
Yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, it's anything to take the edge off is always good. I also, let's just say that before I was a dad, the dad humor was strong, and now it's like, it is on point. It's on point. Everyone that works with me, at least like 10 times a day, rolls their eyes and despises who I am as an individual.
Because you made a dad joke?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They don't stop. It really doesn't stop. I'm always on. Like, you can't stop the dad jokes. I'm actually doing a really good job right now holding myself back.
You are.
Yeah.
Okay. So, in terms of setting up the office, anything else? I mean, you're basically creating a lot of systems. You're trying to make sure that things can run smoothly.
Yeah.
Anything else that
calendars? Oh man, we blow up really big calendars in the office, and we put Post-its on them. Every single Post-it will have what's on the schedule for that day. And then of course, every single time we get a new schedule, we rearrange the Post-its. We put stuff on. We put little notes on there for the day. You know, special equipment, where we are, who's in it, that kind of thing.
And how many of these calendars do you typically have to manage? Well,
that's what I was about to say, is that my John Wester, I love working with him. He on Wounds, he did every single one of the calendars, and we had like 20 offices. So every single time we got a schedule change, he would go and have to do that for 20 giant calendars. And it doesn't, it's not like a little tiny thing. It's very tedious and it does take time. And the last thing that you want is one producer to go into his office and have one Post-it at a place, because that creates a huge stressful conversation among all the producers and whoever's currently in their office to have a meeting, because they all assume that that giant calendar is accurate. They've got the schedules in front of them, but it helps when you're looking at something big in front of you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would assume that they have the PDF somewhere, but it's nice to be able to have a conversation and look at what's happening.
Yeah.
So you've got the office going. You're in the middle of production. You're managing PAs. You're doing distro. What type of technology are you using in your day-to-day life, or systems that you've either grown to love or hate?
Man, I never gave Synchronize the right amount of daylight, because Synchronize is a really good program used for distro. It's used for watermarking. It's used for all kinds of stuff, but it is so streamlined and it's so efficient. The main drawback with Synchronize, though, is that it's not cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're working for a production who's really, really trying to keep that budget down, you tend to go for a cheaper program that normally doesn't do all the same things that Synchronize does. Now, that said, I used a program on this show, Bill and Ted Face the Music, called SetKeeper.
Oh, yeah, I've used SetKeeper.
I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. I'm writing up quite a few notes on things that I didn't like, but for the most part, it was wonderful, and it came at less than a quarter of the cost that Synchronize would have been. And it did all the same thing, plus the wonderful guys over at SetKeeper also threw in a bunch of bells and whistles just so that we would try to keep using it on future shows.
I know. Their side feature is really cool, and in the sense that you can make them in like 1 minute.
Oh my gosh!
You click scene, and then it just does it.
Yeah. And sides is like a kind of a sensitive subject nowadays, because it used to be all by hand.
Mm-hmm.
You used to have to see what scenes were in the following day based on the call sheet that had just gone out. You used to have to pull those pages from a script.
Oh my gosh!
Print those out. Pull out a Sharpie, cross out the scenes. Then you had to make copies.
It was painful.
Copies on copies on copies. And now, like with the SetKeeper, you just click. You click the damn scene that's supposed to be on the sides, and that's it. They're done.
And what's cool about the SetKeeper and I haven't used Synchronize as much, but those programs allow you to have these groups, so you can send a group like an email to all the art department.
Exactly.
Or all the ADs,
Yeah.
And it just makes your life a little easier in terms of just emailing anybody, right?
Exactly.
And it looks more professional too.
Yeah. And the watermark, and it watermarks all of them too, like automatically if you want. You can adjust the opacity and all that. Oh, I'm not going to talk about like watermarking opacity. God help me. And it also lets you change the color, which is like, who prints the sides in color? But guess what? I did one set because I wanted that watermark to be in blue.
Right. So, okay, besides SetKeeper and Synchronize, what any other programs, tools you like to use?
For feature films, that's pretty much the gist of it. The program that we use the most is probably Excel.
Yeah, and Google Docs, I'm assuming.
Yeah, Google Docs from time to time. I like Google Docs, but for the most part, I don't know. It depends on what you're working on.
You're just old-fashioned?
I am. I'm an old fart.
Come on, you got to get on the Google Docs.
I know.
So, but and then what are you using Dropbox to save all your files?
Oh yeah.
So in terms of folder structures and stuff, do you have a specific folder structure that you duplicate over and over again?
For the most part, I don't really change the layout of my Dropbox, and it's not like I originated it. It's just like from the very first Office PA job that I had when I was invited onto a Dropbox. I've basically used that one.
Yeah.
And added to it on every single job that I've had before. So
Right.
I've got a folder for accounting, actor agreements, vendor agreements, anything that comes from the art department,
Mhm.
anything that's going to be an asset during wrap. You got your background releases, you got your break. I'm going to, go down my whole
yeah.
list.
Yeah, you can't list all those things. I mean, I think,
But I've got
100
100+ folders.
so I spent an entire day one time just trying to make the perfect folder structure
Yeah.
because I was just bored. I think in an office doing nothing. Like it was one of those days where we had like 2 people on the cast or something.
Oh, yeah.
So I would like make all these folders within the folders within the folders, so that it's like
Exactly. You know exactly where it's going.
yeah. Because I mean that's a big part of your job in the office. Really is making sure that every bit of paperwork has a home. It is labeled.
Yes.
And
5
scanned
times.
in, right? And then a lot of times I know it's getting pretty new out there, but we're kind of doing away with the whole wrap binder. Do you find that as well?
Oh my God! Yeah,
Thank God.
No, I like the wrap. I know. I'm
No.
old fashioned,
Oh my
man.
gosh,
I like
come
to
on.
hold it.
No.
Oh yeah.
But do you
there's
really
nothing
want
like
to store
holding a
that in
wrap
your
binder.
closet for 5 years?
Yeah, I do.
Oh
I'm
my
a
gosh.
hoarder. No, I mean, heck, at the end of wrap, when everybody's like, "Hey, nobody's bought this from Set Deck yet," I'm like, "Oh really?" I have no room in my house for more furniture, but guess what? Yesterday I walked away with a new bar cart and a dresser.
And your wife's like, "What is going on?"
Yeah, the dresser is still in the back seat of my Mercedes. It doesn't fit, but it's there.
Oh my gosh, you're hilarious.
Yeah. But the file structure in the Dropbox is very, very large, and over time, as far as file structure goes, I'll definitely say that I try and keep my mail organized almost the same way, but that never works out. Almost never. I look at my mail pretty much as files. Every single bit of email represents a to-do that I have to add on to my list. So, if same type of thing. If I have loss and damage, it goes in the loss and damage folder. If I have something that's going to be brought up for accounting, I put it in the accounting folder. But there's subfolders and subfolders and subfolders.
And then you go through these folders when you have time, and you're
Yes.
like, okay, let me check and see what's in the call sheet folder.
The most important one
Mhm.
is the day files folder,
right.
which I don't have subfolders in because it's all, it's by date. It's all arranged by date and day, and so I don't really have to get too crazy with that. But that's the most important folder I have in my mail.
Do you ever have anybody you're sending a document out that cannot for the life of them sign a PDF?
Yes. And
What do you do in that situation?
I try to pretend like they don't exist. I try to forget those people exist. But
do you ever
I'll
use
make
like
it
a
easy.
HelloSign or DocuSign
Yes.
to make that easier?
No, and that was actually part of the SetKeeper package. Is they added they have basically their version of DocuSign.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so you can now send people documents, and you can set exactly where they need to sign it, and that works really, really well. It's good stuff.
Now, some of these companies, especially the larger companies, really want this wet signature. Do you know why? Are they not okay with the digital signature for some reason?
I haven't really run into that too much. It really depends on what they need to sign and how important it is, but for the most part, DocuSign is accepted by a lot of people these days.
Well, I mean, even SAG and sometimes DGA will want a wet signature, but I'll still sign it with a digital signature, and they don't really say anything, So it just it's weird.
Because that's just one more argument that they have that they don't want to have.
Mm-hmm.
It's like how big of a deal is it really? How much time and effort is SAG going to put into making sure that they get the wet signature as opposed to the digital one?
Right. I want to jump around a little bit. Going back to the office, you have your team in place. How many PAs do you typically have or work with?
Well, like on Bill and Ted right now we have 2, but we also have an office PA we call him the fixer. So for the most part, he's worked on set, but anytime that we are a little short-staffed in the office, he kind of comes in as a swing. That's been really, really great. He's been amazing. But like on wounds, I was a POC. We didn't have a POC, and I had 3 office PAs. All did an absolutely wonderful job. And I tried to delegate certain tasks to them to kind of keep all of them as a utility knife, but it took like 2 weeks, and one of them just kind of like turned themselves into the secretary and started taking on the secretary tasks. One of them was, for the most part, a runner, and the other one was kind of like a swing.
Right.
In that, I look back at the 3 of them, and I think that's a good baseline for what I'm looking for in my office PAs. I have no problem saying that. And every single office PA that I've ever had has done an amazing job. They're all great. I love them all. But it worked very efficiently on wounds.
In what regard? And you're saying figuring out what they're good at and
yes.
kind of saying, okay, you take on this task and you do that.
They were able to step up and figure out what they should be doing. They were able to use their experience and know exactly what they needed to be doing whenever. So even though I was communicating it to them, they were already kind of on the same page. It made things a lot easier on me because without a POC on that whole show, it was a little different, just a little bit.
And when let's say you're delegating these tasks, is there a time you like to do this? Like in terms of, do you have a morning meeting with these guys or gals?
Usually I kind of break things down the day before. If we really need to start off strong, like right thing, right thing. First thing in the morning, I always like to try and delegate tasks if I can, but most of the time I'm coming into work and I'm going straight to something. Mm-hmm. So normally I'll try and knock off like 1 or 2 things from my list, and then I check in and see how everyone's doing. See, like, y'all were supposed to do this. Has this been done? Has this been done?
Do you find yourself becoming more of a micromanager?
I find myself trying really, really hard at holding back my micromanaging style. And the older I get and the more that I do work, I find that the best way to get things done is to micromanage. When I'm working for someone who's micromanaging, they drive me insane, but it's efficient. And that has, there is definitely, I am younger and I am still learning, and I've tried everything I can to like keep it cool, be the hip guy, but that just doesn't really work in terms of efficiency, because I know that if I become super micromanaging, I'm going to be hated more than I am when I make my dad jokes. Mm-hmm. Big time.
Right.
And I think that there is always kind of that feeling that you need to be liked by everybody in order to get things done, but that's not really the case. Some of the best work that I've ever gotten out of people that work for me is when we're not really too close on a personal level. They just kind of get their things done, and then we do become really good friends because I see that as a personal favor.
I think, for me, it's like when it comes to micromanaging, it's all about, have I worked with this person before?
Yeah.
And do I know their skill level?
Right.
Like if there's somebody that's like brand new and they're just thrown into it, I'm going to want to see that email before they send it out.
Right.
Because if I don't, the email's going to be atrocious and they're not going to have some email signature or something, And so it's just even the small things like, okay, well, let's make sure that you have your cell phone number on your email signature so they can call you if they have a question.
Yeah. And that's a very good habit, because especially when working in the office with distro and having to send out, say, a call sheet to 300 people, I want to see that email before it goes out. I'm not perfect. Sometimes I've shot out a call sheet email with like the wrong time in the body, and you try and correct that as soon as you can. But I will always take on that responsibility and knowing that it's my fault. But when it's somebody else putting in an error like that, I still think of that as being my fault.
Well,
And
and I think you have to almost preface it with the people you're working with that, I'm going to micromanage you because we all make mistakes,
Mhm.
and we just, for the sake of the company and the film, we just need to double check each other occasionally.
Exactly. Exactly, because I'll write the email and say, hey, double check it. I need a
Mhm.
second pair of eyes
Right.
because it's 2:30 a.m. and I got here at 8, and I
And your
wanted to
brain's
leave.
fried.
Yeah, I wanted to leave at 11, and then this stupid 50-foot techno crane thing came up, and I've got to get that. I've got to get that in 30 minutes from now.
Right.
That kind of a thing. But it really stinks when an email goes wide to everybody from an office PA who made the assumption that it was ready to go out or that nothing else had changed, and then I've got 2 or 3 emails telling me, hey, don't send it out yet. Those situations like that are always extremely frustrating. So yeah, I think that having those office PAs or whoever show you the email before it goes out wide, very, very smart. Good call.
When you are working on set and hours on set are changing, let's say they're doing splits or nights, but you don't necessarily need to keep an office open all night.
Oh gosh. Man.
Is there a trick or something that you figured out in terms of rotating people or?
So I ideally, this all really depends on how things are set up in the very beginning, because ideally for us, we're able to get transpo to take care of the football is, of course, it holds everything that we get first thing in the morning that we need to put the production report together and get everyone paid.
Right.
And so ideally transpo can pick up the football and they can pick up the night drive that, goes to get processed at the end of the shoot. That's a huge thing because whoever takes that drive at the end of the night is taking all of the work for that day. So essentially you're looking at $150,000 to like $300,000 worth of work that could just go missing if you put the wrong person in charge of it. So if transpo seems a little bit of wishy-washy for taking the drive every single night to where it needs to go, then that's when we try and get a PA to handle the night drive. And it makes us feel safe knowing that the drive will get to where it needs to go, but at the same time, it does mess with our staggering. I always like to open the office at 8 a.m., no later than that, but I also always like to have a PA in an hour and a half before call time. So if call time is 6 a.m., they're getting there at 4:30, like at least. But sometimes earlier than that because sides need to be put out, and if you're on a show where there's constant script revisions, there's no guarantee that people are going to get accurate sides the next morning unless you get someone in pretty early. And that's a real bummer. Like, that's a real bummer because it's borderline unfair for that office PA, because then they're just, they get there early and there's almost really nothing for them to really do before that 8 a.m. comes around. And that, because usually people are still kind of asleep on set even when they get there super early, and the requests don't really flow until 8 or 9 a.m. Then usually I like the secretary to come in at either 8 o'clock or 9 a.m., like an hour later. But like travel coordinators, for the most part, are dealing with people who leave their offices at 6 p.m., so you kind of have to take that for what it is. But yeah, then as far as that late night office PA, I want them to come in like an hour and a half after call, because if they're taking the drive home at the end of the night, then that'll give them time for the drive to get processed. On shows where the office PA doesn't have to take the drive at the end of the night and transpo does it and transpo handles the football, it's almost always come in at call time. But I don't like the idea of anybody staying in an office past midnight, to be honest. I don't see the point.
There's just not much to do.
There's really not. Like the whole like 2:30 a.m. 50-foot techno crane example, that doesn't really happen all the time. That's like maybe once every 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things. So it's a lot more manageable than I'm making it sound. But those requests usually come in closer to 11 p.m. than 2:30 a.m.
Right.
And that would normally give me a good solid hour to figure it out. But for the most part, you're not going to get that 50-foot techno crane until the following day anyway. So you might as well just call it a day and come in first thing in the morning to resolve it. And for the most part, if I'm asked constantly by a department to put something together between the hours of 11 p.m. and 2:30 a.m., it tells me that they were not prepped.
Mm-hmm.
And how if you keep on fixing those problems for specific departments, it's only going to teach them that it's okay. They're going to keep on doing that last minute thing without putting much prep in. And that can make a production bomb.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make sure that departments feel liable for their preparation. And that's not really the job of the APOC or the POC, but we kind of get those red flags and can usually bring up those red flags whenever we need to.
Do you have any books or things you've read over the years that have helped you in your work or your job?
Yeah, I've read a lot, but as far as being an APOC and a POC, the book that's helped me out the most is Great Expectations, because it's all about how everything's kind of a disappointment.
Who's the author? Remind me.
Charles Dickens.
That's right.
But yeah, all joking aside, no, I haven't really read a great book about being an APOC or a POC because it's something that I kind of fell into. Initially I wanted to be the writer. I wanted to be the one shooting it. And I found myself in the office. I enjoy the office. I love the challenge like the fire drill of getting the 50-foot techno crane at 11 p.m. or, between 2:30 a.m. Like I love those challenges.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I dig about the job. And most of the time you're not going to be able to read a book that tells you what you need to do in that situation. You're going to have to be thrown in the fire and learn from experience. The biggest life lesson, I don't want to go off, the books, but Great Expectations, man.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Yeah, I think it's a bestseller.
I think that's our first. It's a fiction book, right?
Yes.
Okay, this is
first. Who's to say?
Our first fiction book that's been recommended. Do you have any technology yourself that you like? Whether it's for your little office space or apps or anything that you like to use to help you in your work?
Going back to Wunderlist, that's it's very, very helpful. Specific technology that I use for work that helps me out. It's silly. This is kind of silly, but yeah, my Apple Watch has been crazy helpful. I used to roll my eyes when I saw people wearing Apple Watches, but it's no joke. Like if I've been waiting an hour for a phone call and then I step away, of course, to the wonderful Crafty that I set up first thing when I moved into the office.
Right.
If I walk to Crafty in that 2-minute period of time, chances are I'm going to get a phone call.
Uh-huh.
And if my phone is on my desk, I can take that phone call through my Apple Watch like I'm on Star Trek. And it's like the best feeling in the world to walk around a massive office space talking to your watch and getting those looks. Oh, man, I love it.
I remember when I was little, I used to want to be Batman, and have the little device.
Yeah.
That came true. Any other, gadgets that you like or things that you like to use in your office? Doesn't have to be technology related, but it could be just gadgets that you use. Do you use a Pendaflex at all?
Wait, a what now?
A Pendaflex?
Pendaflex?
Yeah. Come on. You're an APOC. You don't use a Pendaflex?
Pendaflex? What the fuck is a Pendaflex?
it's that colorful hanging file thing.
Oh, heck yeah. Okay. Yeah, of course.
Okay. Well,
of course.
Sorry.
Well, no, it's just been a while because I'm used to using those hanging files and stuff on commercials. That's really when
you're mobile.
Oh, yeah. When I'm mobile, that's
Right.
when I really bust those out. But for the most part, when I'm in the office, I just use like an accordion folder.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, like I mentioned how my Dropbox has like 100+ folders. Yeah. When I go physical, I've got like binder upon binder upon binder upon binder. So that's, I'm old school, man. I'm old school. Like I the last movie I did, Queen and Slim, like I put together a pre-wrap book, like an 8-inch binder full of just like where I was at. And someone else walked by and they were like, throw that away. That's making me really stressed out. And I was like, well, what do you mean? This is like half of wrap. Like, throw it away. I don't want to look at it. Okay.
That would be me. I would be telling you to throw it away.
Yeah. I get it. I have a problem.
You're stuck in the 80s.
Yes.
So, talk to us real quick as we wrap up. Do you have any advice for people that are out there? Maybe they're thinking about, your job and like, hey, I'd like to give that a shot, or yeah. What advice do you have for that person?
Don't do it if you're not great at time management. And if you care a great deal about your personal life, might not be the best idea. It can be a very, very stressful job, and those puzzles that are constantly coming up that I love solving. Even though I have fun doing it, it does take a toll. I try to tell people all the time, like, really, those that I work with, those are my best friends. 'Cause outside of work, like, I'm not really doing anything social. Again, I've got a little kiddo that turns 4 tomorrow. I've got a wife, and I'm very much focused on that. So between family and work, it's really tough to do anything extracurricular. So, don't jump into it without knowing what it is. And I am very fortunate enough to have found myself where I am. And I still don't really know how it happened. So it's one of those things, like, you might try to end up in the office and find yourself on set. Every single path is totally different. And the reason that I found myself in the office and I stuck with it is because I'm good at rolling with the punches and putting out fires at any time of night.
And you got to have thick skin.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's look, everything's gotten a lot better, but I'm extremely sensitive, and it took me a long time not to take things personally. I mean, everything that I'm told, any kind of critique, now I'm at the point where it's like, okay, I'll fix it. We'll get it fixed. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
But initially starting out, every single mistake, could be from other departments or anybody else. I always felt like it was my fault, even as an office PA. So you have to come in knowing not to beat yourself up and just keep on pushing, roll with those punches. And the instant you stress out and think that you can't do something, that's when you can't.
If somebody wants to find you on the interwebs, are you online anywhere on any social media?
But again, man, I'm old school. No, I'm no joke though.
Do they send you a letter in the mail? Is that how they should find you?
Usually, if you send me a letter, I'll think about reading it. No, but like I when I was in college, it was Facebook. I was like swimming around in other people's opinions, and then after I signed my NDA with Dustin, I found myself not really having anything I could post on Facebook because my life was centered around my job. And I kind of liked not really being able to post anything. And it was like, I find myself in a kind of stuck because I on one hand, I know that I should definitely be more involved on social media, but on the other hand, I hate it now. So it's like I'll get on, I'll see if I have any messages, I'll see if I've got notifications, and then I'll look at the first 3 posts, and then I get off.
But if anybody wants to follow you, are you on Instagram or
Yes,
Facebook?
sorry. I am on Instagram as space_naps.
Okay.
That's Instagram.
That's the one they should follow you, right?
Instagram is the one that I follow, keep up with the most, and I think my last post was March 17th.
You know, that's kind of my goal is to get every podcast guest on Instagram if they aren't already on there.
Because I love Instagram. I really do.
You know, it's just pictures,
That's it.
And it's like you don't have to have some
it's not
big, long conversation. It's
Right.
like, here's my desk or here's me on set.
Yeah,
you know?
it seems like Facebook these days is all misrepresentation of people. Like, people kind of put up like a fake version of themselves, and I'm so scared of doing that. I don't know. Because who am I?
Right.
And on Instagram, it's just like, I went to the museum today, and here's some cool pictures I shot.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You know, I think during our talk today, I really had fun nerding out with you about all this stuff that,
Oh, yeah, man.
you know, I feel like most people don't understand. So I feel it was valuable, and I hope it will help other people in their journey to run smoother offices and accomplish movie making behind the scenes.
Yeah, I hope people take away that, anything can work, and really you just got to keep in there and learn from every single thing that happens. When you're in the office, there's no telling what you're going to be asked to do.
Right. All right. Hey, thanks, Collier.
Thank you, man.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Go for Production. You can listen and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can also listen online at assistantdirecting.com, where we have articles, links, and free downloads for people that work in production. When you visit the site, be sure to subscribe to our e-newsletter to stay connected with what we're doing.